You're watching The Point with me, Liu Xin. We'll take a short break, and when I come back, what's behind President Trump's accusations against Google that it has been assisting the Chinese military at the expense of the U.S.? Stay tuned. As China strives to lead the world in artificial intelligence innovation, the U.S. seems to have opened a new front to slow Chinese progress. Earlier this month, both U.S. military leaders and President Donald Trump accused Google of assisting the Chinese military with their application of AI, like with image recognition technology to analyze drone footage. Though the high-tech company denied the charge, Trump this week met with the Google CEO Sundar Pichai, essentially forcing him to choose American patriotism over free market values and his company's own economic self-interest. Trump then emerged from his Thursday meeting with Pichai and proclaimed that Google is now totally committed to helping the U.S. military, not the Chinese. The dispute symbolizes the latest friction in the escalating competition between China and America, whether economic, military, or technological. So what does the Google controversy say about the new uses of AI? And more broadly, what does this incident illuminate about Sino-American competition in this booming AI industry? Joining me in the studio is Professor Jeffrey Towson, an American digital competition expert at Peking University, and Dr. Jishe, an expert on international security relations at the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. Gentlemen, welcome to The Point. First of all, let's take a look at what President Trump tweeted on his Twitter account after the meeting, talking about the kind of victory of patriotism by this big American company. There you have his words clearly written out there. So, Jeff, how do you look at this tweet that this American company is totally committed to helping American military, not the Chinese? It sounds a bit naive to me, but how does it sound to you?
This was a comment by a general that quickly escalated to President Trump, because it kind of hit the three flashpoints, at least for President Trump, if not for the political system. China, AI, and Google, all in one shot, escalated. It's pretty vague. It's not clear what it is. I think what is probably real within this is this idea of the technological relationship between China and the U.S. So much of the trade situation has been about technology. Mm-hmm. And within that, obviously, 5G is incredibly important and AI is incredibly important. So I think that's sort of the discussion as the 5G discussion goes on, what will be the AI relationship?
Yeah. Well, Google has denied, right, they're not working for the Chinese military or helping the Chinese military. This is what a Google statement said. We're not working with the Chinese military. A Google spokesperson said, we are working with the U.S. government, including the Department of Defense, in many areas, including cybersecurity, recruiting, and healthcare. Why does President Trump want it written out in bold, clear, simple language on his Twitter? What does he want to say? Basically forcing an American company to pledge allegiance kind of to the U.S. state.
I find it's very interesting. Actually, that's a non-issue in my view. That is good to serve for that country, not for Chinese military. But President Trump, by sending out a tweet, just makes that accusation about Google and Google's practice and Google cooperating with China, and force Google to come to meet with President Trump and made that kind of statement that they will serve for the U.S. military instead of the Chinese military. I think he created that problem and he pretends to solve that problem. That's very interesting.
Basically, you were talking about General Joseph Dunford, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff of the United States, right? Because earlier this month, there was a testimony of this general before the U.S. Congress, where he talked about, in his judgment, that the U.S. assisting the Chinese military in advancing technologically is not in U.S. national interest. And he was talking about that Google was indirectly benefiting the Chinese military by continuing its operations in China while not continuing its contract with the U.S. State Department. Jeffrey, what's behind this kind of conclusion? Is it evidence-based?
I mean, AI is such a big term. It's basically like electricity. It's going into everything. If you talk to any of the Fortune 500 companies, U.S. or Chinese, are you doing AI? The answer is yes. So it's kind of, the question is, what are we talking about? And from what Google has said is, look, we're doing education, We're doing maybe supply chain, retail. Those are things that nobody has an issue with. And a lot of the Chinese companies, Alibaba, Tencent, they have AI labs in Silicon Valley. So this AI is not the issue. It's what industry are we talking about. If we were talking about aerospace, then this might make sense because that has some military in both sides. But this doesn't appear to have, I mean, it appears to be education, retail, and other things which are not related.
Basically, this is talking about Google's AI lab in China, which opened late 2017. How much do we know about the reason, about what they do, about this lab here in China?
I think what's important is not about AI, the cooperation over AI between Google and Chinese company. It's more about, President Trump and his team is trying to inflate China's threat. There's a red scare in the United States. They talk about any cooperation with China in the high-tech area could be benefit China, benefit Chinese military. So that kind of.
What is the evidence of what you just said?
We did not see any solid evidence. They did not see any evidence either. They just talk about that. They talk about it's not goes beyond this issue. It goes more to other issues as well, including those accusations about Chinese institutions working in the States could serve as a spying, peanuts, Chinese students, Chinese visitors. So that's one way to inflate China's threat. But by combining AI, Google, and China, that's a very fancy topic. That to make that accuracy, they do not need any evidence, in my view.
General Dunford also said this. He said, typically, if a company does business with China, they're automatically going to be required to have a cell of the Communist Party in the company, and that this is going to lead to that intellectual property. This is going to lead to that the intellectual property from that company finds its way to the Chinese military. It's a distinction without a difference between the Chinese Communist Party, the government, and the Chinese military. Jeff, you have lived in China for 10 years. Is that how you see things?
No, there's a little bit of confusion on the Western side because it's not clear how the system works. That it's state capitalism. Obviously, the government is very involved in a lot of industries, and the U.S. is separate. That doesn't mean everything is the same. So there's this idea that maybe perhaps the government involved in everything. That's clearly not true in practice. So I don't think what he said is based. I don't think it's true. I don't think it's this necessary, absolute transfer that happens.
Basically, if what he says is true, then no U.S. company can work in China. No U.S. research, high-tech company can come to China because once they're in China, they will be subject to spying or whatsoever. Dr. Fan, I think that is a bit scary, right? To think that way.
President Trump wants to build a wall, along the border with Mexico. But now I think in his practice and his remarks, he's trying to build another wall. That's an invisible wall between China and the United States over a high-tech cooperation. He's talking about that any cooperation over those areas could benefit the Chinese military. That kind of statement is very much ideological driven. It's very much about talk about inflate China's threat. It's not about any what's going on the ground. It's about what kind of political and security implication could be.
Yeah, Jeff, what do you think of that kind of understanding that President Trump is trying to build a wall, an invisible wall between the United States and China in terms of technology cooperation or transfer of knowledge?
I think there is this question, which I think is larger than President Trump. I think it may be a good portion of the U.S. government. This idea of how much of China technology and the U.S. technology are going to be together and how much are they going to be separate. And in many ways, some of the applications are separate. Is it going to go all the way down to the 5G standards? Is it going to be chips, 5G? I mean, there are some separations. Is it going to be complete? I don't think so, but definitely that's what people are talking about, that perhaps we will see two different technological standards emerging. And China will have one, and the U.S. will have one, and then which will Southeast Asia take? Which will Italy take? That's an interesting discussion that's playing out at the 5G, the chip, the AI level.
But we talked about 5G in the first segment. What do you think will be the implication economically if this plays out like that? Because right now we have one set of standard globally for the 5G. If the United States says, okay, we don't agree with that, we want our own standard, and those countries, if you are my traditional security allies, you follow me. How is that going to play out economically for the United States?
It's a competition. The businesses are doing what they're supposed to be doing. They're trying to, there's a lot of benefit to being the standard, for sure. And Chinese companies are doing what you would expect them to do. They're trying to create the next standard for the next 10 or 15 years. If they weren't doing that, that would be a problem. It's generally not winner take all in these things. Generally, we see several standards emerging with trade-offs, and countries choose.
But basically, the 5G standard is a result of collaboration from many countries, and China only took a part in that. But let's not go further down in there. I want to highlight two things that General Dunford highlighted, why he believes that AI by Google is going to harm the United States. First, it's going to harm an authoritarian government to assert control over its own people, and then it's going to enable the Chinese military to take advantage of the United States. And the reason why the United States is more technologically advanced is because of our system of government, meaning the U.S. system of government. Mr. Fan, what is behind all of this?
I think that U.S. want to build a two system. I think the U.S. has sort of concern that China could win in that competition. That's why there's lots of anxiety over the possible competition from China side, including in the area of 5G. In U.S. efforts to block China from entering into American market, from access to Western market as well. The U.S. is trying to convince its ally to block Huawei from entering into the country. That's very interesting. I think that anxiety on American side, they are not to compete fairly with Chinese company. That's the big thing for us.
Yeah, Jeff, do you see this as only the beginning of a longer-term friction between the two countries in terms of high technology?
I don't know if we would call it friction, but we're clearly at the beginning of something new, which is China is doing very, very well. It's making great technology. The U.S. does the same. And they're competing and balancing, and I think this is going to be the story of our lives, that this will keep happening. And, competition is not a bad thing. There's a lot of benefits to it.
It depends on how you compete, though.
But I think definitely in the last year or so, we've seen the beginning of something new that we're going to keep seeing.
Yeah. What about the Chinese side? Should the Chinese side brace for more, conclusion, more companies having to declare that they're not going to do certain things, even if it is a free company?
I think Huawei had indicated that it's open, and it will take care of the.
I'm talking about Google here.
Yeah, from other side, and I think it's very likely that kind of cooperation and competition will be there, and regardless what kind of President Trump's policy could be.
Okay. Many thanks to my two guests, Professor Jeffrey Towson, an American digital competition expert at Peking University, and Dr. Fan Jishe, an expert from the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. And with that, we come to the end of this edition of The Point with me, Li Xin. As always, you can follow me on Facebook and Twitter using the handle The Point with LX. Download the application called CGTN to watch the show on your mobile devices, or go to YouTube and look for CGTN The Point. Thanks for watching. We've got The Point.